Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for taking a little bit of time to come on over here and listen to our interview with leadership from Lincoln Community Center. Just to give you a little bit of background on what we're doing here with these interviews, young leaders in Miami County got together and said, hey, we want to make an offering to the community. What can we do as both a service and something that is educational? And we decided that it would just make sense to interview folks who are in leadership, who are leaders in our community, from all kinds of backgrounds. So last interview we had was with Missy Dewar from Indian Creek Distillery. So that's a for-profit, the distillery. And now we're moving over here to this nonprofit area. And I'm just looking in the community for leaders to share the ups and downs and the goods and bads of leadership. So we've been very, very grateful to have this second episode with Shane and Karen. And I want to take a moment to thank young leaders of Miami County, especially Shelby Cheney, who's done all the production for this little amateur show that we're putting on. She's going to record, obviously, and then going to put this up on YouTube later for folks to enjoy. So I just want to thank those folks. And now move on to some introductions here. Shane Carter and Karen Boone. Shane Carter is the executive director of Lincoln Community Center. Karen Boone is their board president. I don't need any show notes to talk about Shane Carter. Actually, I reached out to Shane Carter about the same time I got my position here as director of Health Partners Free Clinic. I basically was reading a lot of books and being told by a lot of folks who've had years of experience what to do, and was trying to find somebody near my demographic to be polite about it. And I heard about this guy over at Lincoln Community Center was doing some crazy things, seemed constantly get in the paper. I thought, I need to reach out to him and just get to know this guy, break some bread with him, and just understand what he understands and see if I can't steal some things from him, because that's what I like to do, is find people who are successful and steal as much as I can from them. So he was so kind. I remember that afternoon, Shane. I'll always remember that afternoon that you invited me over. I came over to the Lincoln Community Center. It was in the summer. It was so hot in that building, and it continues to be so hot, but that's okay. We've got light at the end of that tunnel. But you took me around the entire facility. You were very gracious, and I asked you some very poignant questions of you, and you answered them honestly. And I'll tell you, that really, I was at a spot right at that moment where I just thought, I had Moses moments where I didn't know if I was going to make it. And after meeting you, I had this exuberance from that interaction. I just felt determined because I saw you determined. So that was an amazing thing. And I've just been following your career, and we've become friends since that. And then Karen, I met you in Leadership Troy, and was just so impressed with your philanthropic mindset. And I wasn't extremely shocked to hear that you were investing your time at Lincoln Community Center and then moving on into your position. So I'll ask you guys further about those pieces of your background. But before we get too far into the interview, I thought I'd turn it over to Shane and have you just explain to the listeners here a brief history of Lincoln Community Center and the services there leading up to the 49 different services you provide today.
Yeah, well, Justin, thank you for your kind words. I would say you said you were kind of motivated by me. I'll suggest that I've given you those phone calls back now. So if we're keeping track, I'm probably calling you more for advice than you're calling me. But that's part of being in our position. The Lincoln Center obviously is near and dear to me. Short story is, for me, in terms of how I got involved as a kid, I grew up here under the tutelage and guidance of Harold Hughes. We played on a team called the Lincoln Center Tigers. I wanted to spend the most of my days here. As you noted, the facility was always extremely hot, and that we thank God every day for air conditioning. But one of those things where in the summer, regardless of how warm it was here in the building, Monday through Friday, we spent our time here. And then me and my friends and people I'm still friends with now, we'd always go next door to Mr. Hughes' house. So that was always near and dear to my heart. I returned here in 2011 and been the executive director since then. And I'm thankful for that position. And we work hard every day to provide opportunities for, educating, uplifting, and informing the community. And we don't put an age on it. We don't put, a specific demographics or geographical location. We just serve folks of the Troy and surrounding vicinity. So our history, Justin, is really rich. I'll be brief so we can move forward. But we started in 1865 as a one-room, really schoolhouse that was a community hall that was being utilized for education for African Americans. At that time, If you know the story of the Randolph slaves, approximately about 17 years before that, in 1848, they had came north here by way of the canal, and they were pushed off of land up north of us in like Mercer and Auglaize County. So beyond that, the Lincoln Center became a hub for education for African Americans, not only in Troy, but in the Miami County, and somewhere that was definitely unique for our location. From 1865 to 1874, we operated as a one-room schoolhouse, and then we moved forward and became offering semi-professional football team in the early 1900s, gained the attention of many leaders and aristocrats, and in the late 1920s, they started forming Lincoln Community Center Association Incorporated. For 14 years, planned for our community center, and from John Spencer and his wishes and his wife Caroline and Dr. Wesley Bradford, as well as the United States government and WPA money, the Lincoln Center was finished in 1939. Construction started in 38. October 1st of 1939 is when the actual building dedication was. And from 1939 until today, we've operated as a community center. We've grown dynamically. A lot of folks understand that prior to the Civil Rights era, it was one of the only places that folks throughout the county and for that reason throughout the area utilized. And then beyond the passing of the Civil Rights Bill, and even before that, it was a place where, in my opinion, all folks have always came. And my mother, you know, she's white, but she grew up here in Troy, and the center was a place she learned to swim in the early 1960s. And throughout that, you know, I've had multiple generations on both sides of my family utilize the center. So we're very proud, not only of our leadership currently, but the folks before us, people that paved the way for us. I grew up under the guidance of Mr. Hughes and Daryl Chavis, and Daryl put 51 years of his time in here, as well as a lot of other great directors and board members that I would kind of, you know, take me an hour to recite. But the point is, we've really grown in the last 9-10 years as a place where education is very important to us. Our after-school program is the backbone of our programming, and the Troy Foundation has supported us for now. We're going into this school year would actually be our 9th year with that starting 2011. End of the year was the first year we did that. So we're excited not only to continue to provide education, but our recreational programs are taking off too. So from a historical standpoint, what folks need to know is the Lincoln Center started as a one-room schoolhouse. It transitioned with the planning starting in 1924 and the construction in 1938 as a community center. And we've been in that same operation in the same place since that date. So we're excited for our expansion because obviously it's been long coming.
Yeah, and we're gonna talk about that a little bit later here, but I wanted to make sure I understood something. So you mentioned the Randolph slaves and their story, and I don't, you know, I can't say I completely know that story. So what you said, they went to Mercer County, got pushed off that land. Were they able to settle then in Troy? Is that how that worked?
Settled in Troy, Piqua, Hanktown outside off of 571, Cartagena, a spot out by Greenville. So there's about 6 different pockets where they settled. Rossville up in Piqua. I would say, Justin, because I'm not a historian, but I've read up on it a lot. A great book to look up would be The Conspiracy of the Randolph Slaves by Anita Lungsford. That's an educational document. Anita Lungsford, that's Lungsford. That has the court documents because a gentleman by the name of Goodrich Giles, who was an African-American who was the president of the bank and owned a lot of land in Piqua, he used his own personal finances to pretty much file a court case against their land being taken from him. John Randolph, he kind of was a guy not only ahead of his time, but within his will, he had his 380 plus slaves freed, and he had bought land up in Mercer County where the lake is now. They left from Virginia, and then when they got into Cincinnati, got by way of the canal, arrived on a perpetual calendar that would be 1848, I believe in June of 1848. And they were met by folks that had pitchforks and pretty much said, hey, you know, pushed them off their land up around New Bremen before they even got there. And then they turned around and came back and settled in these pockets that we're talking about, Piqua, Troy, and the surrounding area.
Wow. What? So Conspiracy of the Randolph Slaves, who's the author again?
Anita Lungsford. That's a good one. Short read. It's a good book. I believe the history is accurate on it, most important and factual.
Well, and I'll try to get I don't know if we can get a hold of that for free, but I'll make sure we'll get a link to something on the YouTube video when we have this recording put up. But that's very fascinating. No, I didn't know a lot of that story. So then from them came the center. They focused on getting this one-room schoolhouse then together, the Randolph Slaves.
I would go back and suggest that along with the Randolph Slaves and their settlement here, that the a lot of the abolitionists in this area that were Quakers, they believed that slavery should be abolished. So even prior to the signing of the Emancipation, this area had what I would call slaves that didn't really – they were freed slaves or indentured servants. And I believe that's part of the reason that William Lee, who traveled with John Randolph's slaves as his lawyer with the documents, that they chose this area was because of the progressive and forward thinking of the area during that time. And the fact that once they got to this area, even down around Cincinnati and into Kentucky, they had their papers, but they knew when they came here that there were other folks that looked like them that were working as freedmen.
Yeah.
They were very skilled, though. They were blacksmiths. They were carpenters. They were way ahead of their time in farming, because the plantation that John Randolph had was it was almost, I want to say, in both plots of land, maybe 1,000 or 2,000 acres.
Wow.
So they built it. They built it with their own hands. Obviously, they were masons and carpenters and things of that nature. So the importance is the relevance I would draw would be, if you have time to go up to Rossville and Piqua, there's a plaque there that the Ohio Historical Society's put up, and on that plaque it names the last name of the Randolph slaves and the ones that inhabited and grew that area. And you'll notice that a lot of those names are folks that are in our history books here at the center, meaning like their last names match. And a lot of them are still, generational, 3-4 generations down, still folks that live here in the Troy and Piqua area. So,
wow. And I recall one time we had a conversation about the history, and you were able to say definitively it was the first nonprofit started in Troy.
Well, no. I don't think I said that. I think what we led ourselves to believe was that beyond churches, I think it was the first African-American organization that had its nonprofit licensing. So, and that was based on, back when the community chest, which was way before the United Way, and reading some paperwork. So our licensing even went out like in early, like 2009. And then I think the structure of the organization wasn't fully in place. So the paperwork we dated back to was 1919. But with the state on file, we were first incorporated in 1924.
Wow.
But some of our African-American churches, like St. James AME next door, they started actually way back in 1848, Justin. So they were here right whenever kind of those slaves were, a lot of the Randolph slaves were coming to this area. That church was definitely in existence. Yeah.
That's amazing. It's just such a rich history that, I don't think a lot of folks know or understand. And that's just fantastic. So Shane, what about you personally? So you said, you grew up at the center. You had some folks at the center that you kind of cleaned onto, but what brought you back? Why did you decide to come back in this role as the executive director? And then also, did you feel prepared for that first year as executive director?
So what brought me back, actually, my father, Justin, had Alzheimer's and dementia, and my mother was taking care of him, and my mother still lives around the corner in McCagg, where I grew up at. And I started coming to the center every morning to work out my brothers, Alex and Lance. So we come at 6 a.m. We come at 5:30 before school, and just building a relationship with the director there. At that time, Isaiah Williams, who's still a great friend of mine, he was doing some good things here, and he was fortunate in that he said, Shane, I'll have somebody let you in, or we'll get you a key. And I just started lifting weights and really getting involved as an adult. And from there, really, we started our first football camp and basketball league, which had been in 2011, just with volunteers and myself. And seeing that grow, and then understanding that, being in here every day, Justin, I can make a bigger impact, is what ultimately led me into this role. I, as an adult, did I think I was prepared to run the center? Absolutely not. But bigger than that, I always tell this story, and it's just the honest truth. I think my own father and my mother, whenever I came back from school, they really, not that they didn't encourage me to do it, they just thought that the center had fell so much in terms of what needed to be done. They thought it was a whole bunch of work, and they were right about that. It was a lot of work. However, it's the most rewarding job alongside with coaching that I've ever done in my life, because seeing the impact on young people, now being here, heck, what's going on 9 years. I've got kids that when I first started, they were 7 years old. Now they're 16. They're getting their license. We got kids that were in the 6th grade that now are, finished with law degrees, master's degrees, very highly educated, talented folks. So I don't believe I was prepared for it, but I just think that God over time equipped me. And, I remember the first day, September 11, 2011, we had like a United Way fair at Hobart, and you've been to plenty of those, Justin. And I asked our treasurer, Ted Zimmerman, I said, where's our board at like everybody else, and where's our pamphlets? And he said, I got news for you. You got to make them. And I said, oh, okay. And we kind of laugh about it all the time, because that was like the first day on the job. It was a United Way fair at ITW. And I just remember us standing there telling people kind of what our vision was, what our goal was in terms of getting kids back in the building. And sure enough, we built it and they came, and we're continuing to try and retain people the best we can and stay as busy as we possibly can and provide programs the best we can.
Yeah, I never heard that story about the United Wayfair being your first day. That sounds actually like the worst first day you could ever have. So I commend you for sticking around after that one.
I just took a legal piece of paper and folded it in 3-way sheets and started making business cards and handing them out to people. Okay, my name's Shane Carr, I'm the director. Here's my cell phone. Call me and we'll have you down for a tour. So it was fun, man. It was challenging. There's been many times in my life, Justin, I've played sports in front of 100,000 people. I don't think I've really ever been nervous beyond my freshman year. But there's been times in this job where I've stood up in front of people. I'm like, wow, what have I gotten myself into, and/or are we really prepared? But that you grow through that. Those are the growing pains that, at least for me, that make it really worth it, at the end and throughout the process.
Yeah, I'll be honest. That's exactly it, Shane. Thank you so much for sharing that. But I'll be honest, I've asked that question to so many different directors, and all of them, 90% have said no, I wasn't ready. And the ones who say yes, I'm almost positive are lying. So
right. Yeah, I wasn't prepared, man. I used to actually too, Justin, and it's not that it was anything beyond just being young and wanting to be able to get things done. I felt like every single day of every single hour that I had to be here. Like if there's a piece of trash, all right, you got to pick it up. If there's a parent, and that takes, number one, hiring good people, which we've done, but number two, it takes really trusting. You got to trust that, all right, hey, Justin, I'm going to take off. Can you make sure that things get locked up? And then if anybody, falls or has an issue, we report it. And I think that we've grown as a staff dynamically in that piece, because the fact of the matter is, and our staff knows this, they have the knowledge and ability beyond even me to run the place. I'm just a vessel. That's what I am. And I mean, obviously I try to work as hard as I possibly can. I've been taught that. But we have an equipped, knowledgeable staff that wants the same thing that all of us from a staff and board perspective want. So we're very fortunate for that.
Well, that's a sign of a good leader, Shane, is someone who wants to grow up other people to be better than they are. And that's, it's the thing you see, the characteristic you see in success stories. So thank you for saying that and embodying that and talking about leadership with the community, Lincoln Community Center. Karen, obviously, I felt it was very important that you were part of this interview today as the board president. You've seen the Lincoln Community Center through a couple things. I've seen them through some big things. But before we get into that, I just wanted to ask you when did you first get involved with Lincoln Community Center, and what led you to your current leadership position in the organization?
Okay, so like the Randolph slaves, I moved to Miami County from Virginia, but only several hundred years later in 2002. And I wasn't met with pitchforks. I was met with a very welcoming arms here. I moved here to teach at Overfield. So my background is in education. I had taught previously at a private school in Virginia, as well as Head Start in Virginia, where I grew up. So my parents have instilled in me from the time I was very young that the way you feel involved and welcome in a community is to serve. So that's something that, I didn't really, as nice as Ohio is, I didn't love it. I didn't love being here. But I did get involved immediately when I moved here in 2002 or soon after with a youth center that's in Pleasant Hill. It's called The Barn. I worked there as a co-director and then served on the board for several years. Around 2005, 2006, I moved to downtown Troy and, heard some things here and there about the Lincoln Center. Didn't know a lot about it. Actually briefly attended a church that met in the Lincoln Center gym briefly for a short time frame. So had been in and out of there. And then in 2015, I joined Leadership Troy. As you know, you're required to either do an internship on a nonprofit board, write a paper, or do a project. The board seemed much easier than doing either of the other two. So I started my internship there, and it's a year-long process. So just sat in on board meetings, observed, kind of got to know what was happening there, started volunteering at a lot of their events, and quickly just fell in love with the center, its vision and mission, the staff, and really all the community that make up the center. Shane, the staff, the board, the volunteers do a ton, but really the Lincoln Community Center is the people that come there. And I truly, with my education background, I think adults can change, but it's much easier to instill hope and change in the youth. And I feel like the Lincoln Center I felt like it was a good place to start. And I've served on the board since then, since 2015. Well, 16, I officially joined the board.
Wow. So Shelby, take note, the Leadership Troy program out of the Troy Chamber produced the board president for Lincoln Community Center. Okay.
This is true.
We'll give you props. We'll give you props. That's fantastic. So obviously you're a teacher, you're interested in youth. Was there, what was your take on diversity and how diversity could be utilized as a benefit and a positive in a community like we see with Lincoln Community Center? Were you drawn to that, or was it just, I want to be around the kids here in Troy?
Some of both. I was for sure drawn to the diversity. I grew up in a rural community outside of Roanoke, Virginia, on a farm. My parents' house was actually slave quarters originally from a large plantation. So the majority of our neighbors were African American. So I was familiar with some of that culture, not entirely, but definitely familiar with low income, with people of color, people that are different. And again, I credit my parents. They were very, they just really encouraged us to not have friends that always looked just like us or went to the same church as us or went to the same school as us. And I don't know, walking into the Lincoln Center, I immediately felt welcome and felt at home. And I didn't feel different there. But then, on the education side, I liked what they were doing. I liked the after school program and the multiple other programs that they were offering for the enrichment of the children of the community.
That's awesome. Well, very grateful that you're in the position that you're in and at the helm of this thing as it continues to grow. I want to ask, I want to go into a question. We've talked several times about how welcoming and how much you feel like you're in community when you walk into Lincoln Community Center. There was a time, at least in my experience, that I saw with the community center really being what brought the entire community together. That was back in 2015. There was a tragedy with the Bishop family. 3 children were lost in a carbon monoxide poisoning in a home. And Shane, as leaders, I think there is, some folks call it skill, some luck, some chance, but there seems to be moments when you're asked to rise, and you either rise or you don't. In your career, if I might say, I think one time that I really saw this pivotal moment was after this accident, this horrific thing, this tragedy. We really saw you as a community step up and step into something that men twice or 3 times your age don't always know how to handle. And I just felt strongly you did a tremendous job with that, trying to help us all mourn that loss. Obviously, the children were members of Lincoln Community Center. I've always wondered and hoped you would answer what your perspective was on that moment and what it meant to you.
Well, Justin, I would say that particular, number one, just Miss Jean, their grandmother is a friend of mine and is a person that I admired from the first day I met her I met them whenever they first came from Buffalo, because of how she raised her children and her grandchildren with the same morals and values that my grandmother and father raised me with. So whenever, that happened, and trying to work through it, the first thing I thought of is, what can we do for her and for her family? And then for, the young people that we as adults struggle, with death and mourning. So for the young people that are coming and telling me, they've lost their friend, and I just really thought that I had to do something. So I really just prayed, Justin, and thought and meditated. And I think our staff and our board was on board literally, meaning let's do anything we can. It's always so much bigger than, you know, somebody passed away, we want to drop off a cake or a meal, but you know, when the dust settles, what do we really do? And we try to not only support the family, support the community, give them their proper respects, but we also ultimately too, and I learned this from Miss Jean, is that try to use it as a moment to reflect and just remember that, you know, the Lord, he kind of decides, you know, on things, and we don't have control. So as I sat with her, her strength encouraged me to do whatever I could do, which, you know, I try to do what I could, but there's always more to be done. And her belief in God and her ability to be strong was really important to me in that time. And we use it as a situation to not only pass an ordinance here in the city as far as making landlords responsible for carbon monoxide detectors and having those that they're signed off on each year. That's what the revised ordinance requires. So that should be happening. I think there's one thing that comes out of this talk today, is anybody listener that listens to this, is that happens both in your own home, and if you rent a space, or if you know where a family is or children are, or somebody that is in a wheelchair, the least we could do is knock on the door. You know them once a year. Hey, let me check your smoke and carbon monoxide detector. So just, you know, what I just tried to do was to be a glue of some sort. It was a very mentally and physically sickening time. I don't know how else to say it, but learned a lot about not only myself, but I learned a lot about the strength of Miss Jean and her family, and how much those girls were loved. And, you know, we had a dance that they were going to with Miss Archibald the night prior to for Black History Month, and at Edison. And I just remember them telling me they didn't feel well. And, you know, it's just something that you always have on your mind. You know, you never, if somebody tells you that they're sick, or, you know, somebody tells you, you know, that they're going through something, I think we need to take the time to listen, you know. And that's just one thing that I take from that moment, is just, you know, there's certain times where people in their life say, I just don't feel well, or today I don't want to go. And a lot of times we just get in the car and go, or we, okay, Justin, I'll see you next time. But a lot of times if you rally back and say, hey, Justin, something going on, man, I need to know about, or, you know, you sure you don't want me to take you out and get your blood pressure taken? Are you sure that, you know, the Health Partners Clinic's open on Thursday evenings? You sure you don't want to go see if you can get medication? And I'm preaching to the choir in my own self, because I can be stubborn. But in that moment, definitely an educational teaching moment, because, you know, I believe that the Lord doesn't take anybody in vain, but I think that some things can be prevented. And that's it's a tough discussion to have, but it's just one that every day and every time I'm here at the Lincoln Center every day. This is my neighborhood. So there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about it. So tough time. I think the way the community rallied for their family, to support their family, and to support Miss Jean was really important to her and to Lincoln Center. And we just want to be able to move forward, and like I said, learn from that, and make sure that's something we, from a prevention standpoint, that we work towards.
Well, I certainly can appreciate that you using that as motivation. And I've had those last conversations with some folks, and yeah, you do kind of put it on yourself, like, you know, maybe I shoulda, or maybe I coulda. But we got to use it as motivation. And I think what you've done with that ordinance, that's substantial. So thank you so much for sharing.
And I give the ultimate respect and credit to Matt Simmons in the fire department. You know, there's one voicemail that I have on my phone that I'll never delete, and it's that voicemail whenever he called me, really to just be, you know, to be a brother and say, hey man, I don't know, but I can imagine what this feels like for the family. And, you know, there's some things that we need to, you know, do as leaders to get done. So it's something that, you know, it's devastating, Justin. I struggle talking about it, but like I told you, you know, it's something that, you know, you just got to be tough, and you got to, you know, move forward. And like I said, the ultimate sympathy and empathy is to Miss Jean, who's just a heck of a woman, and who raised, you know, those kids to be stellar young people. So, you know, we really commend her. And like I said, I commend what they were. They were artistic. They love music. They like to laugh. They like to dance. They like to sing. And it's just really, really important to us in our organization. We never forget them.
Yeah. Well, thank you for fielding that question and just your transparency with that. I appreciate that. So let's talk about, you know, I mentioned earlier that the warm building, the light at the end of that tunnel is that there's a new building coming. and there's a new facility. I don't know if we could see a picture of that anywhere. You don't
Well,
have that anywhere handy, do you?
My easel actually.
Oh, that's behind you. Oh, okay. All right.
No, I'm messing with you, Justin. But yeah, so we're excited about it, man. Construction's underway.
Yeah. Can you tell me what led to that groundbreaking moment, literally the groundbreaking moment, and how much time did it take to get there?
Okay, well, I'll tell you this. There's a sticky note on my desk that in December of 2011, I put up on the top of our, it's kind of a little dream and wish board that Nicole and I started back then, and we still use it today. And up at the top of that is new building. And what I realized was from 2011 to 2014, we put about, between private grants, capital improvements, about $179,000 in it. Moving into the next year, and I remember having an Excel file run that was about the total of 248. And I said, if we're going to stick $248,000 in the facility, number one, let's keep it and preserve it and the historical relevance and all that stuff. But the other piece that came to mind was, well, what's next? Because you can't knock out brick walls and start, stick framing off those walls. So what was next for us was we needed, adequate educational space, number one. We know that a lot of our adults and seniors and kids value recreational space. So started in 2013, with some discussion back when Mike Twist was with another firm and just some rough sketches of what space we had. We found out that, realistically, in order to add this 21,000 square feet, which we were never at that, we were kind of like a 16 to 17,000 square foot addition at first. We needed to acquire land. So we started purchasing land here on the block, 124 Ash, 130.5 Ash, and had this event called Planning for the Future at Hainer, where very intentional and purposeful and strategically, and we probably should have incorporated more people. We wanted to have 30 to 40 folks in, talk about the goods, the bads, the uglies of the Lincoln Center, the historical value, what people really like about it, what they don't like, no parking, no air conditioning, lack of handicap accessibility. It's really, really nice, but, in August, it's tough for kids to learn when it's 85 degrees in the gym. And we took all this, if you will, feedback and created, a strategic plan that encompassed programming and facilities and maintenance and staff development. And we started investing our time and our energy and our resources in planning for an expansion. With that going on at the same time, we're growing our staff, we're purchasing a second van. We never had a van. We're purchasing a second van. We're starting to transport kids. Our programs, as you said, are growing to, 49, 50 programs. And I explain it bursting at the seams. And there's a couple times in the day when you want to see the center when I talk about bursting at the seams. 4:15, Monday or Friday, after school programs going on, folks are using the weight room, people are in the pool. There's nowhere to park besides Lafayette or CVS. And there's buses coming down here, dropping kids off from Concord. Parents are dropping off and picking up. And then we're transitioning in the winter into basketball practice for 80 kids in a day. And the word is simple, it's dysfunctional, and it lacks efficiency because we're taking staff to transform rooms for meetings, then we're taking and holding a group of kids back in the hallway. Well, at that same time, we got kids passing by, that are leaving from the after school program. So our board worked extremely hard. Our staff continued to handle the operations and allowed for the bandwidth for this growth. And I will tell you that here in July of 2020, this is by far a 7-year planning process. When we had our kickoff here early in the year, obviously, we were very fortunate for the Robinsons to step up and support at the level that they did. But all of our top-tier donors are folks that we've been working and building that relationship with over the last 7 to 8 years and keeping them abreast to why, based on capacity, based on budgeting, based on staffing, safety, why we needed that space. So kept going around this circle, and what we came up with, Justin, was we know we needed parking. That was just 7 parking spots for the last 80 years, haven't cut it. We knew that we really, really, really needed to find a way to be more handicap accessible. So we planned for a facility that's really all on one level besides a mezzanine that'll allow folks to get in and out of doors with proper clearance in terms of doorways. And we thought that was very important. And the third piece that's very important to me was from an overall safety goal is from a security standpoint, controlled access points in the doors, and keeping patrons separate. So in other words, when I've got 83, 100 kids in our after-school program, and maybe you meet a guy comes in your clinic and says, "Hey, I'm looking for a place that's affordable to swim." And you say, "Hey, man, go down to Lincoln Center. It's $10 a month. They've got a heated pool." Well, he may show up when he gets off work Thursday at 4 p.m. or Friday at 4 p.m. Well, just like the schools, it's impossible to screen every single person that comes in your facility. So that's where my overarching goal of safety was, let's create separate space where our kids coming up here after December, January, when the facility's done, they'll be in the educational wing. They'll be able to do art. They'll be able to do wood carving. They'll be able to take CrossFit. They'll be able to go and do, me and you, you're responsible for that. We worked hard for that Steve's Club CrossFit program, you know?
Yeah, right.
But they can do all these things. And if your buddy or Karen sends a friend that she met or whomever that is wants to go swim and use the gymnasium in the old building or the weight room, we don't have to limit our hours and our ability to be able to host them. So that really has been important to us. And that's what I'm most excited about. I think that there's been so many times in our lives, at least my life at the Lincoln Center, where you're like, okay, volleyball's in the gym today. You're like, all right, when can we play? You got to come back tomorrow at 5 o'clock, between 5 and 7. It's like, you know, for a community, neighborhood, true community center, we want to be able to not make that excuse that turns a kid or an adult away that really needs to utilize our facility.
That in healthcare terms, we use the word holistic. You take care of the whole person at any time. That's
right.
Brilliant, man. I love that. So what I'm hearing is that you had some crazy dream in 2011 and you wrote it on a Post-it.
Yeah, actually, I still got it. And deeper than that, Alan May, who's our board member, a longtime board member, he took a piece of loose leaf notebook paper and he started drawing like out front where the bushes were. He was like, you know, we're going to pretty much level that area and we'll knock this down. And then about 2 years later, he came back. I'll never forget. He's like, we can't knock this down, can we? And I said, I think the historical value is too, you know, it's too important and too rich. And ultimately here in Troy, you can say what you want. It's a double-edged sword, I know, for the schools, but we do a pretty good job of historic preservation and taking care of older buildings. So I remember taking that piece of paper and saying, we'll just throw it in the file, you know, and from there working with, you know, Mike Twist and being able to come up with a plan. Really, Justin, the first plan was $5.2 million freestanding building. Didn't allow for the buildings to transition from the old facility to new as far as connectors. And our board did a great job. We hired a firm actually to do some consulting, the Hodge Group out of Columbus. Sure. Looked at fundraising, looked at bandwidth and capacity of our own organization, looked at like projects throughout this area in the region. And I will say that the consultants didn't tell us anything that we already knew, but allowed for our board to have a third party to say, hey, you know, as an outsider, this is what I see. We took that information. We went and really vetted through our project, got it down to a $3.8 million project, 21,803 square feet, that has connections from both locker rooms, that has the holistic approach, if you will. We're going to have space for, we do now what I would call some preventive, like we got some blood pressure and glucose checks that Premier Health provides, but we were doing it one Tuesday or Thursday a month. With the new facility, we would like to be able to offer, we are going to offer that more. And then we're really going to look into offering at least minimal throughout the school year, mental health, and having a trained, if you will, licensed person that can help assist us, both adults and children, with that support, because we've seen that as a need as our staff. And naturally, you know, we wear multiple hats, but we don't necessarily have somebody on staff that, you know, educated and specialized in that area. Yeah.
Wow. That's going to be an amazing value. Obviously, in the healthcare sector that I'm in, I know that mental health is a big issue. So that's awesome. Karen, let me ask you from your perspective, from the board level, what kind of strategic planning, as Shane had talked about, the strategic planning went into that. What all brought you to this monumental point?
Right. Shane covered a lot of that. He's really good at covering all the bases. But, you know, like he said, 7 years of dreaming and hard work. And really not just of the board, but the staff, the community volunteers. I mean, it started before I was involved. So when I came on board with the Lincoln Center, they had already started this project. They'd held the event, I think in 2013 at Hainer, where they started asking questions. What's good about the center? What's not? What do we need? What do we not need? So then the board developed a strategic plan from that. Sort of taking in everyone's opinion and kind of brainstorming again and making a plan to see what we thought we could do, and immediately saw the need for a feasibility study. I'm sure you're familiar with those. So basically, you know, we asked the community, what does the community need? What do you think the center can provide? You know, what did we think the center could provide? What did we think what we needed to really operate safely? With the amount of kids and people in and out of those doors. Like Shane said, you know, this past fall when school started, when the buses came by, you couldn't even get in the building. There were so many kids, and you know, that's a safety issue, number one, and we don't want to turn families or children away. We needed space. So that feasibility study was super helpful. And like Shane said, having someone outside of Troy tell us some things. And a lot of it wasn't new to us as a board, but it sort of just was like, okay, yeah, you guys know what you're talking about. There is a need for this. It is important, and the community can support it and its growth. So we did that, and then we formed the Legacy Campaign Committee. It's a group of volunteers, board members, some staff, Shane, obviously, and then that's headed by Jim and Linda Daniels, who have been super helpful on our campaign. They have volunteered endless amounts of time to help us get to this point and really to run our campaign. We have a great board, we have great staff, but our board are 15 volunteers who have other lives and businesses that they're all running. And the staff is trying to deal with the day in and day out of what's happening at the center. So the Daniels have been extremely helpful in managing us, really, and giving us lists and telling us what to do. So from there, last fall, we launched a silent campaign, like Shane said, with a lot of our supporters that we have been in conversation with for years. And then we announced it to the public the end of January of this year. And from there, I mean, it wasn't long after that that work started happening, and that, you know, we knew it was coming.
Wow. So I think what's amazing is that once you get on the inside, when people are doing these capital campaigns and you listen to all the steps leading up, you know, it's like that overnight success. You know what I mean? You have a groundbreaking in 2020, 2019. And it wasn't an overnight success. You've been dreaming about this since 2011.
It feels really long.
Yes.
And then today I was thinking about it, and I was like, you know, they started work in March and it's July, and to drive past the center and see all that's happened, like it feels like it's happening really quickly. Yeah. And we have a lot of catching up to do. This morning we had a meeting picking out some of the colors and flooring and tile. You know, we have to make these decisions within a week, and it's like, wait, we need more time. But I'm excited to see that it's moving forward so quickly. I will say I'm really grateful. This whole pandemic for the last several months has been really hard, but thankfully in the construction world, it has been really helpful to the Lincoln Center that they've kept moving. We never had a slowdown or a stop in any of our plans or construction, and that's been pretty amazing. Yeah, and
you know, I think before you know it, you'll be walking into that new part of your building, that 21,000 square feet, and just thinking, we're here. We're you know, and it'll be a year old before you know it. You know,
you're right. It'll move fast from here on out.
Well, I had a couple more questions, but in respect to time, I want to jump down to one here, and I think this is a very timely question for both you, Shane, and Karen to answer. But in this current environment, you know, when our community has had to come face to face with issues of diversity as they relate to inequality, what role do you think Lincoln Community Center plays?
It's a good question. So, and we talk about this not only daily as our staff, but our board. So I'm going to kind of give you an overview of kind of where I've discussed with our board of kind of our initiatives and what we want to continue to do. Some of these things we've always been doing, but other things now, they have to be progressively more aggressive, if you will, because what the sense of what's going on, as you mentioned, in our current environment. So here at the Lincoln Center, the first thing that we want to strive to do is to promote leadership and leaders from within, from our center, meaning our young people, our staff, our volunteers, our board for that perspective, because we know what our mission is, but sometimes when you take your Lincoln Center hat off, or sometimes, Justin, when you're just downtown and you see something going on, or you're, you know, at a football game, you know, you're still a leader. You're just not the director of the health clinic, you know? So what our first initiative has always been is, you know, listen to people, but empower our young people so that our young people come back and they're leaders in our community. They're the judges, they're the architects, they're the doctors, they're the teachers, they're your welder, There are all these different positions, because ultimately here in Troy, I think we all know this as leaders, we lack what I would say demographically a diverse workforce that reflects our population of our community. I know the 2020 census will, come back, and we hope it's somewhat accurate, but I'm in every neighborhood of this community almost every day. I have an idea, I think, of what our demographics look like. And I think that it's important right now more than ever that we as leaders, both myself, you, Karen, folks within the chamber, which I really like the initiatives the chamber is putting out. We were talking about them, Karen and I and myself. We have to really ask ourselves, do young people, meaning children, as Karen showed, they're the ones that I think we can mold. Us adults won't change that much. You can say what you want, but we're going to change because we learn and we have experiences, but to change us habitually, our habits, is very difficult. Do our young people feel like they can be any career, profession, occupation, leadership role throughout our entire county? And when the answer to that is yes, meaning not based on race, but based on educational attainment, social and economical differences, where you grow up at, what school you go to. If the answer to that is no, some young people still think maybe I could be a forklift operator, but I can't be the commissioner. I could be the director of the center, but I can't be the president of a hospital. I think that until our young people understand that there's no barrier for them, integrity, education, hard work, they can go be anything they want to be, then I think there's work to be done. And one of the things that's important for me, Justin, you talk about the Centers Initiative, is that we believe we treat every person, regardless of color, with the same support, with the same resources, with the same eagerness to want to help them and allow them to work their way up whatever ladder they'd like. So we want to empower our leaders from within. We want to have, my father always told me when I was living, he said, you want to be in the meeting at the table. So in my opinion, the meetings at the table, Justin, there's different ones. There's city council meetings, there's planning and zoning meetings, there's county commissioner meetings, there's board of education meetings. When I hear from people that they are disgruntled or there's frustrations or, they want to see humans treated differently, my number one thing is, and I want to be a voice for folks, is, okay, let's, how do we attack that? So if we're unhappy with the way that we were treated at the health clinic, I'm just saying, not saying that happened, Justin, but so what do? They have a board of directors. I mean, I know Karen in her role, she's heard from the public before, if they're unhappy with, hey, I came in the center and Shane, he was rude, or the Lincoln Center construction. And I think that whenever you have that type of vested input in your community and you really want to be a part of the solution, you have to go to the proper channels and the proper meetings and be at the meeting at those tables. So what our role here at the center is, we've had a few meetings and we're moving forward with those. Sean McKinney, who will be our chief of police here in August, Zach Mumford and Scott Gates. I told them I want to have a meeting with them to get the law enforcement involved with community policing here at our organization. So what we've built is a schedule where mornings, and now we're working into second shift once we get our full patrons back here at the center. We want to make sure they're visible. We want to make sure that our young people, whenever the Troy police come here, they don't say, hey, who's in trouble? It's more of, hey, what you guys up to? There's dialogue and communication there. We all ultimately too want to make sure that as we work with our law enforcement and we work with our young people, that we can create a trusted relationship there. Because I think right now there are questions that young people and adults have on both, not only am I going to be treated equally, but ultimately, do I have the respect for them? Do they have the respect for me? Do we have a working relationship? And we want to be a platform and a place where that dialogue can happen in a safe environment. And as we work through the backside of this pandemic, I believe our board, our staff, myself, Nicole, and the rest of our staff, we want to take the best step forward that the community believes we can to be that bridge and to be that, not only that bridge, but to build on what we need to accomplish. And it's all going to happen from, I believe, Justin, it's been happening in my life. I've got a meeting every day. Well, I got one tonight, actually. Every day of the week, there's a meeting that has to deal with, okay, hey, Shane, let's sit down and have dialogue. It's the local pastors. It's, the young people that, have formed, their own nonprofit organization. It's our human relations committee within the city of Troy. And I think that until we feel comfortable having uncomfortable conversations, then we've got work to do also. And it's not always just in fun and peachy, but there's certain things, both socioeconomic inequality and human rights issues, and racial tension issues that we have to discuss, because if not, it's like when you sweep a problem under the rug. If you don't deal with it today, well, then things fester. So I believe that I believe it's a very, very influential opportunistic time for all of us, but for our little community here, I think we need to really hone in on what our issues are and then come up with realistic solutions.
Yeah. Wow, Shane, you guys have been at work. That is amazing to hear what you're doing with Troy Police, getting ahead of it with the new chief coming in. I just really commend you on that. I have to be transparent here. I think it was my second year in the position. I had to reach out to Shane with is this racist question? You know, I had somebody here at the clinic who felt discriminated against, and I was like, what do I know? Very little. I got to reach out to somebody that has an idea of the community and what's going on. And you were very gracious then and offered me some counsel on how to handle that. And I'm sorry to your wife that you're going to get pulled in 50 more different directions and have all these questions asked. But you're the right man to be there.
We in the Carter household, we have like our values and the things that like we make sacrifices for. And I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you, Justin. I don't have a home church. The Lincoln Center is my sacred place, and I have other obligations. Some of them are what you were just discussing. So that's where I go, and that's kind of my Bible study. That's my youth group. That's my, So for me, I mean, that's just what it is, and I don't know how else to handle it. Obviously, coaching young people is important to me. The Lincoln Center is most important to me beyond my family and my faith. So part of my job as a director is to sit in and be honest with people, and to be a voice for some people, that maybe don't feel comfortable sitting at that table, or maybe just say, hey, in the background, this is how, Johnny treated me like this last week, and I was really upset about it. I didn't know how to handle it. And, could you please, help me, put a plan together? Because at the end of the day, Justin, everybody deserves, it seems cliche and corny, but it's not. Everybody deserves to be treated the same. That's it. Yeah. I mean, once we get there, I think we're getting somewhere. But if that doesn't happen from the top down and it's something that we're whispering from the bottom up, I think we'll continue to fight an uphill battle. So we just got to make sure that we're being honest with each other and that we're listening more than we're talking, because a lot of times for me, it's like, if I'll just be quiet and listen, the person will tell you what they're needing. But it's when you think, oh, I know how I can help you, Karen. It's like, no, you don't know. You really have no clue. So,
yeah, I think you make a great point with that, listening more than you talk. And I think we all could take a lesson from that. Karen, what are some of your thoughts on that same question, and what position you think the center plays in our current environment?
So it's kind of funny. Shane and I, didn't compare notes at all. And what he ended on is what I had written down for my initial talking piece for this point, is that really, as adults, as a white woman, as a female, my job is to listen and to learn and to educate myself. And I was with some friends last week, and, they were asking a lot of questions and maybe not seeing eye to eye with me and where I was at. And I just said to them, I said, the last 3 months of my life, I've been educated by a community in Troy that has not been heard. And on some hands, it's not fun. It's not easy. It's hard to change your thought processes. But my job is to listen and to learn, because like Shane said, I don't know what the life he's lived. I don't know the experiences he's had, and mine have been entirely different. I absolutely see the center as a leader when it comes to diversity, inequality, and justice. Thanks to Shane, I'm going to plug another book. I've been reading, it's not really a book, more of a publication. It's called Some Self-Evident Truths. And it's really hard to come across some copies, but if you find one, I want it, because I really would like my entire board to read this. It's basically diary entries of a Black and a white woman from Troy, Ohio, between the years of 1946 to 63. Yeah. I've heard about it, bits and pieces here and there, and in the last week and a half, I've been reading it. And part of it, maybe I'm a little voyeuristic. It's reading someone's diary, a personal account, makes it a lot more interesting. And they talk about the wreck and the Lincoln Center and places and names that I've heard of and know. So from the beginning of time, 1865, or I forget the actual year, but even reading these entries in the early mid 1900s, the center has been a representative for people of color, for the underprivileged. And we're still the same today. people see it in different lights. You know, things have changed in Troy as far as who's here, who's living here, who needs the center the most. But there's a lot of different races that come in those doors, whether it be white, Black. We have a large Hispanic population. We have an Asian population in Troy. And so today we continue to be a leader and a voice for the unheard in the community of Troy, no matter what your race is and no matter what your demographic is. That's what a community center is, and that's what the Lincoln Center is striving to be, just a voice for the unheard here.
It's fantastic. And yeah, that I knew I'd heard that title before, and it's been a couple of years since discussing that. And in fact, I heard about that book while I was sitting in the Barbell Atkins Community Center. Okay, so the old church. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of like ground zero for that entire interaction and the stories that were there. And if you didn't know, the Barbell Atkins Center was a church in Troy, and it actually was part of the Underground Railroad. I don't know if you can even access it anymore with some of the issues with repair that are going on, but you can actually, there's a display in their basement where you can look down and you can see where they use some paths. But yeah, that's just, it's fantastic that we've taken that history and decided to do something more, and that Lincoln Community Center is really leading the way on that. And I'm so grateful to both of you for sitting down with us and just having this conversation. I have one last question that I never tell people about prior to. It's one I stole from Tim Ferriss, but I want you to tell me, if you had a billboard that you could put up on I-75, and for a month you could put one word or phrase on it for everybody to see, what would that be?
Karen, you want to go first? You want me?
I'll go first.
Okay.
Love, because I think that's where it starts. If we can't have a love, A, for ourselves, and B, for the fellow man, our neighbors, our community, the people around us that we work with, the people that we deal with day in, day out, if we don't have love, we really have nothing. And without that, there's no hope of change. There's no hope of becoming a better person. So yeah, I think that's what I would choose. Well
said. Very well said.
I would say my word would be simple, just be understand, because I think that as a lot of us, I'll never understand why so-and-so walks different, talks different, has different values, uses different dialogue, feels a certain way about a certain group of people. But as you sit down, for me, it's, I'll tell you a short story, and just the truth. My family, majority of them on my mother's side, they're in Greenup County, Kentucky. And when I go to that county, I'm usually one of the 10 to 12 African Americans in the county, probably. And as I sit down and have dialogue with a lot of those folks that have a very different approach than even what we do 3 hours north of them, we always come to the end conclusion. I've been this way because this is how I was taught. Justin's this way because this is how he was taught. But if we both can understand those differences, we actually start getting somewhere, because now we're not focusing on our differences as much as, hey, I know Justin thinks this way, I think this way, but we still got to get here. So.
Very good. Very well said. Well, again, thank you guys for taking time out. I know I've run us over a little bit here, Shelby, but I wanted to check with you and see if there's any questions from the audience at all.
There is one from Kate. Can you see it? 'Cause it's pretty lengthy.
Oh, yeah. Let me take a look here. I got the chat up. Okay, so Kate says, as the brick and mortar is completed, what will the center need from the community most moving forward? Volunteers, monetary donations, cheerleaders, marketing support, etc.
Great question.
Yeah.
So I would say a combination of all. We're always looking to recruit and retain quality volunteers. Our ratio with our kids, we want to try in our after school program, keep it about 6-7 to 1, meaning it's children to kids, or to young people. I'm sorry, children to adults. I would also suggest, obviously we really hit the ball hard the first of the year with our fundraising, and we had some, if you will, as Karen talked about, some of our long-term funders that had supported. Naturally, all of our finances have been impacted by COVID, so we still can use support towards the actual building project and the sustainability of it. As Karen said, we formed an LLC, so the Legacy Campaign, Greenville National Bank houses that fund. Donations can be made on our website. Follow the Legacy Campaign. There's a PayPal option that obviously takes a small processing fee. So naturally, I would like to save the processing fee on behalf of the donor and the center. So if you bring checks to the Lincoln Center or even take them over to Greenville National Bank, that's always nice. And I would ultimately say beyond building and sustaining, the next piece that would be good is folks to really understand and get the word of mouth out there. I run into people every single day, and I'm sure I will tonight, that say, hey, Lincoln Community Center, you're the director? And I'll say, yeah. And I've heard people say, I thought you guys were a church. I've heard people say, hey, I thought that you guys had something similar to like when the David L. Brown Youth Center, like for troubled men or young people or young adults. So a lot of people that have lived here their whole life just have not been here. So I think volunteers, absolutely. Either send an email to, through the website to me, scarter@lcctroy.com. Support in terms of financial, not only towards the building project. We'll have a really nice donor recognition and paver program that will be rolling out in the next 60 days. So that would allow for, Justin Kobe and say his wife to buy a paver that will be out in our courtyard that supports the building project. Wink, wink, Justin. But then also
I see my name around. You know that.
I know. Hey, you made one of those. You helped us make one of those vans possible, man. That was important. So with that being said, financial support's always needed and awesome. Volunteering is something we need good volunteers. And then the last piece in terms of word of mouth marketing, helping us promote our programming, sharing our stuff when you see it on social media, talking to your neighbors about, what programs we offer for adults and kids. And I think the last piece is I'd encourage everybody listening, if you haven't been to the center, let's say in the past year, I know with COVID, it's very difficult. Come down, get a tour, get an idea, get our program guide. So that way, as we really open up and go full blown with the rest of our programming, you have an idea of what we all offer. Because I think sometimes people have a very small, percentage or clue or percentage of what we actually, everything we offer.
Yeah. I'd agree to that, Shannon. I understand the trial of trying to get that word out. And I think if people understood everything that goes on at Lincoln Community Center, they'd first be blown away and second want to know where to sign up. So thank you for that.
Yes, sir.
Karen, any other thoughts about what needs are going to exist?
No, not really. I would agree with Shane on the majority of that, actually all of it, and I continue to be amazed by the people who don't know either about the Lincoln Center at all, or who, like he said, have really no clue of what happens there on a regular basis, or the amount of people that we help, or the amount of kids that are in and out of the space. To a lot of my friends, I've often referred to it as Troy's best kept secret, because it's like this huge, I see what we're doing day in and day out, and I see what it takes to do that, what people are donating, who's volunteering. But as far as a community, it does seem, we're kind of tucked back in off the beaten path, and people don't know about it. So sharing the word, social media is huge. You guys all know that, but just following that, sharing what the Lincoln Center is doing, talking about it to your neighbors and friends. And I 100% agree with Shane, just visit. I've been involved since 2015, and I'm still learning programs that are happening that I didn't know about. And it's ever changing and ever growing. So just schedule a visit.
Absolutely. And I wanted to mention that Steph Silk has already put her name down for a brick, so you got one coming.
Awesome. Tell Stephanie.
Yeah. I'll bring my money in for mine. Don't worry. One thing I wanted to say, obviously I focus on health and healthcare in a community, and I feel like we do a lot of Band-Aids for things. One thing that's being brought to light and should be brought to light as a health concern and health disparity is racism in a community. I don't have anything in my clinic for that. I'm glad that it's brought up as a health disparity, but the cure is a Lincoln Community Center where people of all background can get together. So I'm so happy you're in our community doing what you do. Thank you again for taking this time out for this interview. Thank you for everybody who's on the call. And if we don't have any other questions or anything we can answer, then I'll thank you all and wish you a good night.
Shelby and Justin, thank you guys for having us.
No yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. See y'all.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.